Welcome back to another video. Today we'll be taking a look at this MacEffects Performer upgrade card for the Macintosh SE. So the MacEffects Performer is based on the MicroMac Technologies Performer, which was released in the late 90s by the MicroMac company. The original card also came with the clip that would clip onto your 68K processor for upgrading a Plus or a Classic to a 68030 as well. So the MacEffects card here comes with a 68030 processor and the FPU to go with it, FPU being the floating point unit. There's not a ton of software that takes advantage of floating point calculations on 68K Macs because FPUs were optional. There was, and still is, a software FPU that emulates having a hardware FPU, which at least allows those programs that require an FPU to run. But it's nice that it's included. I think better to have it than to not have it. So these cards, when originally made by MicroMac Technologies, before MacEffects recreated them, and I guess it was Boll or Bolly, B-O-L-L-E. Not sure how to pronounce that. I've seen the name, hundreds of times dealing with these vintage Macs, but I've never heard anyone say it. So maybe you can tell me how to pronounce it in the comments. But anyway, it was created by Boll and is now being sold by MacEffects. I think they're currently out of stock, but they'll be restocked. So this is a clone of the MicroMac Performer card, released just a couple of months ago by MacEffects, and I think in conjunction with Ron from Ron's Computer Videos as well. I think he was involved somehow. He's kind of always involved in everything Mac related. Anyway, so the recreation card doesn't have the clip, doesn't work with the Plus or the Classic. This only works with the Macintosh SE, and this will take your Macintosh SE to a 68030. And it is running at 16 megahertz, which is the same speed that the SE30 runs at. So in theory, if you get an SE, put this card in, you should have a machine that is equivalent to an SE30. So today, I want to put that to the test. So I've got 3 machines that I'm going to be running tests on, both some benchmarking software as well as some games that we'll be trying to play. So I have a stock SE, I have another stock SE that I'll be putting this card into, and I have an SE30. So to keep things as fair as possible, I'll be trying to keep the machines as similar as possible. So they each have 4 megabytes of RAM installed. I'll be using the same external blue SCSI on each of them, so I can only test them one at a time. I won't be running parallel tests because I want to use the exact same hardware. So we can boot up off the same system, run the exact same benchmarking, and then see if this card actually does offer the performance increase. I think it was 300% speed improvements. The software that you download to run this is actually the original MicroMac software, because again, it is a clone card. It's not something that was created. It was just recreated. So if you look at the documentation that comes with the driver for this card that you're pointed to download when you go to the website, MacEffects.com, it includes the MicroMac documentation on installation, and it does talk about the Plus and the Classic clip and the 68,000 processor and all that stuff. But again, this one only works with the SE. Anyway, let's go ahead and install this into my SE, and then we will start running some speed comparisons. So here are the machines we'll be using for this test today. I have a completely stock Macintosh SE here. So this SE originally shipped with dual 800K drives, 1 megabyte of RAM, and it has had no modifications made to it other than removing the top floppy, and now I've installed 4 megs of RAM in it and moved the resistor over so that it recognizes all 4 megs. But it still has the 800K swim chip. This is about the most basic SE you can find. So there's nothing special here. It's one of the early ones, only upgraded to 4 megs of RAM. That's the only change. The one in the middle here, this is just another stock SE, but this one does have the newer swims, so it can take the 1.4 megabyte floppies. You may notice it looks a little different. I do have it installed in a 3D printed case, but it is still completely stock. It's got 4 megs of RAM as well. Now, if you're wondering, is having an external monitor going to tax the CPU more? Is it going to give invalid results? The answer is no. So the modifications made to get external video are just routing the existing signals that would go to the CRT normally to a Raspberry Pi. Then the Raspberry Pi converts it to the VGA standard that comes out of the back. So it's not additional work for the CPU. There's no way this Mac knows that it's exporting video to an external monitor. As far as it knows, it's an SE with 4 megs of RAM, and this is the one we'll be installing the upgrade card in. When I actually built this one, I had put this in originally, but I've taken it out now so that we can talk about it here. And then on the far right, we have an SE30. So this is a stock SE30, just has had the case replaced by the MacEffects case. Now I'll be using this external Blue SCSI, and this is going to be booting up System 7.1. Now we do need to install drivers to get this card to work, and I found that if you install the drivers and then try to boot up a regular SE, it doesn't boot, it hangs. So that's going to be the only modification we make, is we're going to enable the driver when it's here, and the driver will be disabled for these. Now it shouldn't make any difference, but I just wanted to be clear that there will be that one modification made to support the card in this system. Otherwise, everything will be identical. Same Blue SCSI, same image, so we should get some pretty good performance numbers out of here. All right, so first thing we want to do, let's get this card installed in here so that we can start doing some performance comparisons. All right, so if you have a nice 3D printed case for your SE and you're running external monitors, this is actually really easy to install. You take the case apart and you just install it in the PDS slot. And we're done. With the SE in its original case, of course, it's a little harder. You need to take the case apart, you need to take the board out, then install it, then reassemble. But again, it's not that bad of an upgrade. It's still pretty easy to do. All right, so we're reinstall our case, and now we can start gathering some performance data. So let's start with this guy. I've got my external Blue SCSI plugged in. Let's power it up and collect some baseline numbers. All right, so for our first test, let's run speedometer 3.23. All right, so you can see that we have our 68,000, no FPU, and we do have our 4 megabytes of RAM. So let's go to tests, and we'll do run all tests. All right, so those tests have completed. As you can see here, just about everything is right around 1.0, which makes sense because the base system using is the Macintosh Classic, which also has a 68,000 CPU. So I'll be using charts like this throughout the video to compare and contrast the different performance between the SE, the Performer, and the SE30. So as I just noted, the performance between the SE and the Classic should be pretty much on par since it's really testing the same thing. And as you can see here, there are some slight differences. It looks like the SE might be just slightly a bit faster than the Classic that was used to perform the baselines when the program was written, but nothing to worry about here. All right, and if we look at the overall score, we got a 1.059. Well, let's shut this one down and let's jump over to the next SE, which we've installed the card in, and boot up that one. All right, so let's move my Blue SCSI over to this one. And we'll hit the switch here. All right, so as mentioned, we do need to install the driver for this. But before we do that, let's just run speedometer to show that we are running currently on the 68,000 processor. All right, so you can see that we have our 68020. Wait, what? 68020? Yeah, just ignore that. That's how it shows up when the card is installed, but the driver has not been loaded. It's fine. No FPU, and we have the 4 megs of RAM once again. So let's go ahead and exit out of here. All right, so in this MicroMac folder, we have our 2 requisite system extensions. I'm not going to be installing the AppleTalk patch. I'm not running AppleTalk on here currently, so I don't think we need to do that. But I will drop this Performer 2.2.1 into my control panels. And now we'll reboot. All right, so let's run speedometer 3.23 again. All right, and now you can see that we are running the 68030 with a 68882 FPU. Still have our 4 megs RAM. So now let's run these tests once again. All right, the tests are done here. So now we have FPU benchmarks with the standalone SE. Obviously, we didn't have an FPU, so nothing to compare there. But we'll compare these against the SE30. But let's take a look at these numbers. So just for reference, I converted dry stones to kilo dry stones just because the scaling was so much different compared to whetstones, and I wanted to have these on the same chart. But for the dry stones, the uplift between the stock SE and the MacEffects Performer SE was about 144%, going from 0.978 to 1.41. The uplift for the kilo whetstones was a whopping 1,663%, going from 7.24 kilo whetstones per second to almost 121. And as you can see on the performance testing, the situation looks pretty much the same as well, with the Performer outshining the stock SE and the baseline quite a bit in a number of categories. I think the category where it performed the best was Fast Fourier, with an uplift of 770%, reducing the time from 195 seconds to just 25 seconds. And now with the introduction of the Performer card, we can start looking at FPU numbers. So the speedometer compares the FPU of a Macintosh 2 as the baseline, as there was no FPU in the Macintosh Classic. So looking compared to the Macintosh 2, the MacEffects Performer has an uplift of about 130% in terms of kilo whetstones per second. So then looking at the performance, the Fast Fourier was actually a little bit slower than the Macintosh 2, whereas the second test, the Matrix test, was a little bit faster. So these tests are about on par with the Macintosh 2. And of course, the Macintosh SE doesn't have an FPU at all, so technically this is an uplift of infinity%, adding the FPU to do these FPU calculations. So quite an improvement over a stock SE. And overall, it gives us the 2.925 rating, so just about a 3. That leaves us with one more machine to test. So let's go ahead and quit out of here. Now I'm going to go to my control panels. I'm going to move that control panel back out, just because I've had some issues with it booting on a system that doesn't have the Performer in it. So now we'll shut down, and we'll move the Blue SCSI over to the SE30 next. And now let's go ahead and start that one up. All right, and with this one running, we can run our speedometer. So we can see that we have our CPU, our 68030, our FPU, the 68882. And again, we have 4 megabytes of RAM. So let's go ahead and run all the tests. All right, and our tests are done here. So our color benchmarks not looking so great, of course, because we don't have color. Looking at our FPU benchmarks. Now let's take a look at our just general benchmarks. So what's interesting here is that the Macintosh SE30 stock is actually about twice the performance of the Performer when looking at dry stones, but the Performer is about twice the performance of the SE30 in whetstones. And then looking at general CPU performance, we can see that the SE30 and the Performer are pretty close in most cases. There's actually a couple of cases where the Performer is slightly better, looking at you, Fourier. But for the most part, the SE30 does have a slight edge on the Performer card. And now comparing FPU whetstones, we can see that the SE30 is about 33% better than the Performer at these operations, but again, there is no FPU in the original SE, so infinity% uplift. And then finally, looking at the FPU performance for Fast Fourier and for the Matrix, again, the SE30 is better, but again, the stock SE just doesn't have an FPU, so any added performance here is better. So overall, it seems like the FPU adds a ton of features that are otherwise missing in your stock SE, and then everything else is pretty close. The SE30 and the MacEffects Performer in an SE have pretty comparable performance numbers. There's not a lot of difference between them. All right, Prince of Persia time. All right, so Ron said the problem was going to be with the sound, so let's go ahead and turn the sound all the way up to make sure that we can hear it. Yeah, sound is a little choppy. A little choppy. You know, this sounds I mean, I think the sound's keeping up okay. I mean, the footsteps seem to match the footsteps. Yeah, other than the intro music, which got a little choppy, but that could just be disk activity or something else slowing it down. I mean, this all sounds good. Let's hear what the death music sounds like. So I'm gonna say I don't really see any major problems with the sound. So yeah, there might be a couple of hiccups here and there, but I would say overall this one sounds just fine. Let's check out Stunt Copter. I say it seems pretty good too. I don't really hear any problems here. All right, so final thoughts. This card seems totally worth it. You know, I think you can find SEs on Facebook Marketplace for anywhere between $75 and $125, and this card was $130, I believe, somewhere around there. So, you know, you're looking at maybe $200 for your SE plus this card, and you're going to have very equivalent to performance to an SE30, which are much harder to find, and at the cheapest, they're probably going to be $300 if you can find one that cheap. The other thing is the SEs tend to not need to be recapped because they used tantalum caps and not the electrolytics, so there's less to worry about there. You do have to be aware of the battery leaks, of course, so still with the SE. This seems like a really good way to get the SE30 performance without having to go out and try to find yourself an SE30. So as noted, there are potentially some sound issues because the sound chip is running at the original processor frequency and not the 16 megahertz 68030 chip. But I didn't really encounter too much of that. But I'm sure there are additional games that would have problems with that. So just something to be wary of. And then kind of the final last real problem is that the SE only supports 4 megabytes of RAM. With a real SE30, you can get it up to 128 megabytes, but you're kind of stuck at 4 with the SE and the upgrade card there. So something to be aware of. You know, you're not going to be running later systems like System 8 or something like that, like you can on the SE30 due to the RAM limitations, but 4 megs is probably enough for most people. I don't know. I guess it's something to consider. So anyway, if you have an SE, I would recommend getting this card, and I think it makes a lot of sense to just put this thing in. It's super easy to install. The control panel to install the driver for it, super easy to install, and it's made by MacEffects, and they make quality products. So there you go. I like this thing a lot. I recommend it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hi guys! Make sure to like and subscribe and watch more of our videos later. Bye!